Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Late at night, when the world is still, the ordinary can warp into the unexplainable. The familiar takes on an unsettling edge. A teacher alone in an empty school hears footsteps echo through the halls. Footsteps she swears don't belong to anyone. 911 dispatcher answers a desperate call, only to discover the voice on the other end is coming from nowhere, and yet somewhere. These moments, strange and unnerving, often lead to stories like the ones shared here. Tales of encounters that defy explanation and push the boundaries of belief. The night has a way of revealing secrets to those who face it head on. These are the stories of those who inhabit the night, be it work or be it pleasure. They observe, they listen, they explore. So, let's get started, shall we? A few weeks ago, I wrote about an experience I had while teaching music at a school that I was working at. A child in one of my classes had seen someone walking into the music room, whom I did not see, and later, I saw a child, which I later realized was a ghost standing by the light switch. I have been to this school several times and wanted to do an update. The first time I went back since I saw the apparition, I was really nervous, and I had to relax because I knew that my imagination could start playing tricks on me. Once I got there, I was a lot more relaxed, and I just went with the flow of the day. Nothing out of the ordinary happened at first, although I was walking down the hallway, I felt someone touch me in the middle of my back. It almost felt like a light, slight push. I thought it was a student, so I turned around, but no one was there. That was the only thing that happened. The next time I went, I once again was worried about what would happen, but to my surprise, nothing occurred whatsoever, and I was actually able to just teach and enjoy the day with the students. Today I went back to this school, and to tell you the truth, I didn't think about ghosts at all. I have really been enjoying the students and staff, and it's become one of my favorite schools to teach at. Also, today we got hit with a really nasty snowstorm, so I was more worried about the roads being slick. Anyway, I got there with no problems, and during lunchtime I was enjoying a potato bar that was set up for the teachers. I was also talking with one of my staff about all the snow that we were getting and if the roads would be slick later on. As I was leaving the staff room and head into the classroom, I thought to myself, I wish I could just teach here full time. And I swear, out of nowhere, I heard a child's voice as clear as day saying, "We don't have any full-time jobs here at the moment. Sorry." I turned around. The only person I saw was a little girl. She was looking straight up at me and then ran quickly into the bathroom. I don't know if she's the one who said it, but still, how did she read my mind? I'm not 100% sure if she was a real student or another apparition. She ran into the bathroom really fast as I made eye contact. Can ghosts read minds? Later, I was in the library talking to the librarian while kids were at recess. There were a few kids there checking out books, and then they headed back to go outside. As the librarian was showing me a project she was doing with the second graders, Christmas cards for soldiers serving in Iraq, I saw a little girl peeking out in between the computers. I just assumed that it was a kid who was still checking out books and had gotten on the computer card catalog. But when I looked again, no one was there. The only people in the library were me, the librarian, and her assistant. They were admiring the cards the second graders had made, so didn't see what I saw. I even said, "Where did the little girl go?" And the librarian answered, "The kids are all out at recess." The computers are in the middle of the library, so there's no way a child could have ran out the door without me seeing her. By the way, the library and the music room are on opposite sides of the building. The place where I felt the hand on my back and heard the voice in the hallway is nearest the library. Nothing else happened the rest of the day, and I didn't linger long after school because of the snowstorm. Anyway, I will be back at this school next week. It's on my regular route now, so I'll see if anything happens again. It is funny that one day where I completely didn't worry or even think about seeing ghosts is the day when I see them. Odd. When I was 9 years old in 1970, I attended George Washington Elementary in Corona, California, for one semester. It was an ordinary school, or at least that's what I thought at first. One day, I came down with a fever and ended up in the nurse's office, along with 2 other girls who were also sick. The nurse, busy taking our temperatures, told us we'd have to go home and stay out of school for a couple of weeks. She didn't say much more, just that our parents would explain everything when they picked us up. As we sat there in that small, sterile room, a strange, heavy silence seemed to settle over all of us. The nurse turned to the counter where a tall glass jar filled with thermometers rested next to the sink. She was in the middle of talking when it happened. The jar began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. It slid across the counter, as though being pulled by an unseen hand. And then, with a sharp crash, it tipped over the edge and shattered in the sink. The 3 of us froze, too stunned to speak. The nurse's face went pale, her cheerful professionalism replaced by a visible unease. "Okay," she said quickly, her voice tight. "Let's move to the front office. Your parents will be here soon." As we filed out, I heard her whisper to the office secretary. It happened again, this time in the nurse's room. What did she mean by again? I actually let it go relatively easy for a child. I just sat quietly in the office, staring at the clock on the wall, listening to the sounds around me, just waiting to get picked up. Later that day, I told my grandma what had happened. I thought she'd be a little surprised, but she just laughed and said, "That's nothing. I mean, it's no different than the old house we just moved out of." I realized then that I'd grown up thinking that ghosts and strange occurrences were kind of normal. Our old house had its own stories. Things moved, footsteps in empty rooms, but none of it had really frightened me. It was just a part of life. I was surprised, however, to see it at school. I didn't stay at George Washington Elementary for long, and nothing else happened while I was there, at least that I saw. More so than the jar itself, I'll always remember the nurse's voice and the look she had on her face. Her words make me wonder, what else did happen at that school? What exactly was she so afraid of? I was born in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and lived with my mom and siblings in Holland Park until the age of 8. We were all enrolled in the local primary school around the corner from our house. The school had those temporary classrooms back in 1989 when I was in grade 1. One evening after a function at the school, I walked past one of the temporary classrooms with 2 friends. We heard a strange noise coming from the room. sounding like a chair being scraped across the floor. Looking in through the window, I distinctly remember seeing a very small, green man, looking almost like a toddler, with very long arms, jumping to and fro on the tables, scraping his nails on the floor as he went. I can remember feeling cold all over and simply turning and running, with my friends following behind. I'm now almost 37 years old and still remember this clearly. I have no idea what it could have been, though. If there is a logical explanation, I cannot think of what it might be. I've been thinking lately that it may have been some kind of Takalashi creature or something along those lines. But what would it be doing in a classroom? Well, that's beyond me. I have had other mildly frightening experiences, such as hearing the back door of our house open while in another room. When I went to look, the door was locked. Other than these experiences, I don't think I've had contact with anything supernatural. But I do think this was supernatural. Any comments or insights on the little green man would be appreciated, if only to try and solve the mystery once and for all. During my first year at Southern Oregon University, I joined some friends for a haunted campus tour, led by a veteran security guard. The stories we heard that night were enough to leave anyone looking over their shoulder. Suzanne Hall had perhaps the most tragic tale. During its construction, the foundation pit filled with water over Thanksgiving break due to heavy rains. A young child playing near the site dragged a mattress into the water, climbed aboard, and drowned when the mattress flipped. Their body wasn't found until the following week. Students living in the basement of Suzanne Hall report a chilling phenomenon. A knock on the door, and upon opening it, they're met by a drenched child asking for a towel. As quickly as they appear, the child vanishes. Some say a ghostly young woman can also be heard playing piano in the dead of night. The basement of Taylor Hall is said to be haunted by the spirit of a security guard who once loved the building. Though the specifics are vague, the guard's presence is felt in the dim, quiet corridors. Even I can speak to that. Where Stevenson Union now stands once housed an infirmary. The guard leading our tour shared a chilling personal encounter during its construction. One night, he and a colleague noticed figures in white coats running near the foundation pit. Thinking it was students playing a prank, they gave chase. But as they approached, they watched as the figures ran straight across the pit, defying gravity, and disappeared into the night. Churchill Hall's second-floor auditorium has been the subject of many ghost stories. Its control booth is especially infamous. Working in campus mail services, I often cut through the auditorium on my route, but I always avoided looking up at the booth. The air in the room was definitely charged, as though someone or something was always watching. And then there's the Plunkett Center, the most haunted building on campus. The third floor in particular is notorious. A ghost there seems to have a knack for mischief, ensuring all computer work is saved before 5 p.m. Otherwise, the computers shut off automatically. The guard shared a story of a late afternoon meeting in the third-floor conference room. As the meeting dragged past 5 p.m., the clock chimed, and strange things began to happen. At one end of the long table sat a soda can. Slowly, it began to slide across the table. Everyone stopped speaking, their eyes fixed on the moving can. It reached the other end, paused, and then reversed direction, sliding back. As the can passed by the security guard, he slammed his hand down on it. The meeting ended immediately, everyone too shaken to continue. My own encounter with the Plunkett Center was brief but unsettling. One foggy evening, my RA Laura and I, both photography enthusiasts, took some friends, Lisa and May, to photograph the campus. We ended up outside Plunkett, hoping to capture its eerie facade. Laura had May pose on the front steps, while Lisa and I positioned ourselves further down the slope. As I framed the shot, I saw it, a bright green flash from one of the windows near May. It wasn't a camera flash. None of us used flashes, and there was no way it came from passing traffic on Siskiyou Boulevard. The flash was otherworldly, and it sent chills down my spine. We left shortly after. I don't even remember if I told the others what I saw. Even now, I can't walk by those buildings without remembering the stories, or the feeling that something unseen might be watching. I used to be the only person manning the overnight help desk for an IT company. I would get there just as the last folks were leaving for the night, and I'd have the entire office to myself. After a month or so on the job, I started hearing noises around the office, creaking floors, weird vocalizations, a random guttural gagging sound. At first, I didn't really pay any attention to it. It was an older office, and it made weird noises. But then I noticed that when I'd step out for lunch or use the bathroom, I'd come back and there would be lights on that I didn't turn on, or cabinets opened that I didn't touch. I was 100% sure that some slasher maniac was hiding under a desk, waiting to kill me. Well, it turns out one of our managers was in the middle of moving house, and due to a scheduling conflict, he didn't have a place to live and would be crashing at the office with the door closed. What I was hearing was him trying to sneak around the office without alerting me. And the gagging noises, well, that was him snoring. He was embarrassed by the situation, so he was waiting for me to leave my desk so that he could dash out to grab a drink or some snacks from the supply closet. So yeah, I'm still waiting for my real ghost story. As a security guard, I've definitely seen some creepy things. Nothing flashy like you'd see in a movie, sadly. Any of the stuff that happens is usually a mundane maintenance issue, steam leaks, failing equipment, old pipes, etc. Quirks of the building also come into play. Faint pops and clicks, strange smells of unknown, all normal. What does happen that makes a guard like me get shaky, even after 5 years in the same buildings, are the things that defy explanation after weeks of research and consultations. Things that happen when I'm the only living thing in the building and the cameras outside confirm there's not a single person in 500 meters around me. Things like the booming laughter of a jovial man coming from the security hallway at 3 a.m. Whistle or hum a tune in the first floor gallery. Sometimes, if you stop mid-phrase, an answering whistle will finish the tune from the balcony above you. The distinctive scent of marijuana smoke filling a room like someone's been smoking in there for hours. It fills the room in seconds, lasts a while, and disappears just as suddenly. The cameras are set to record whenever they detect motion. A couple of corridors, including the one outside security, record the minimum 3 seconds constantly throughout both day and night. Like the hall is continuously traversed by unseen people. The facial recognition boxes were turned off by request of former guards years ago, because the system was trying to recognize faces of unseen persons going in and out of the security office. This would happen every couple of minutes. shadows of people walking across cameras as you watch them, but never set off the recording software. At first, I thought these were pareidolia, effects brought on by fatigue or hallucination. Because yes, that does happen too. But this is specifically when fully awake and focusing on a single camera, and a shadow passes by. Like there's someone backlit, walking just out of frame. Conversations. The sound is clear, but the voices and what they're saying are muffled, and they're coming from a nearby room, taking place next to a catwalk 80 feet in the air. Some of these things happen regularly, while others were a one-time thing, or happen very infrequently. I notice them more when I'm awake and fully functional. The sleepier I am, or the less focused, the less disturbing my shift tends to be. I work at a cafe in downtown Anchorage. Quite a few homeless shelters in range and a huge drug problem. One day I'm working behind the bar, and this redhead kid, probably in his early 20s, sits down in our seating area, starts chanting shit under his breath. After a minute or two, he starts moving his hands around like he's casting a spell. Then he gets up, starts yelling and disturbing everyone. I walk over to him and tell him he needs to leave for the day. Dude looks me straight in the eye and says, "This is all a giant game. I'll fucking kill you with one finger." At this point, whatever. I get death threats a lot down here, no biggie. Shoo him on his way, and that's that. Fast forward to when we're closing up, around 9 p.m., so not technically a night shift, but it still counts. I lock the doors, and I start heading to the parking garage where my car is. It's probably about 6 blocks away, not a big deal. Winter up here is insanely dark, so it's already pretty creepy in downtown. About a block or two of walking, and I hear this hissing noise. I freak the fuck out because I can't see anyone around. I pick up the pace a bit, and then I hear hurried footsteps in the snow behind me. Fuck that. I book it to the staircase for the garage because I wasn't going to wait for the elevator. I'm about a staircase up and I hear the door that I just went through slam shut. I finally make it to my car and I get in as fast as possible. I look around and lo and behold, there's the redhead from earlier. Only this time he's fucking furious. He sees me in my car and books at full speed, starts hitting my windows and screaming, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." I door checked him and drove the fuck away. I called the cops the next morning and they found the dude. Apparently he thinks he's in the Illuminati and completely corroborated my story to the police. Small jail time and 1 restraining order later. Never seen him again since. Shit like this happens a lot. I always thought there was something off about the first middle school I ever taught in. It was built in the 1900s, but it was your typical school until everyone was gone. At least that's when I felt it. It was when I started staying late to grade papers that I truly felt it. I was still getting used to the rhythm of lesson plans and grading, and staying late had become a habit. The quiet hallways were kind of peaceful during those hours. I liked the solitude. But on one of those nights, as I sat alone in my classroom, I heard keys jingling. Not so strange, right? At first, it didn't strike me as odd. The janitor, Mr. Morales, often worked late. I figured he was just making his rounds. But as the sound grew louder, something felt off. Even though the sound was getting closer, it still sounded distant. It had a constant, steady rhythm, echoing off the empty walls. There was no pattern, no pause to unlock a door or push a cart. I poked my head out into the hallway, still expecting to see Mr. Morales. The sound was closer now, but still distant or muffled. More importantly, there was no one there. Still hearing the jingling, I called out, "Mr. Morales?" My voice trembling a little. Just silence. I shrugged it off, returned to my desk, telling myself I was obviously being paranoid, but it wasn't the last time it happened. Over the following months, the jingling became a regular occurrence on nights when I worked late. I'd hear it weaving through the hallways, sometimes more distant than others, and sometimes just right outside my door. It became almost predictable. One evening, I decided to just find Mr. Morales, to prove to myself that it was nothing strange. I waited until the jingling started again and quietly stepped into the hallway. The sound was coming from the staircase near the library, so I followed it. As I turned the corner, the jingling abruptly stopped. I found myself staring down an empty corridor. Then, from behind me, the sound started again. I spun around, and there was no one there. I didn't stay late again for weeks after that, but teaching is relentless, and deadlines don't care about ghost stories. So inevitably, I found myself back in the classroom after hours. I brought music to drown out the sounds. It didn't work. The keys jingled louder than ever, as if they were trying to compete with my headphones. I ripped them off, my patience finally snapping. "Who's there?" I yelled, my voice echoing down the hallway. For the first time, I heard something other than keys. A low, guttural sigh. I didn't go back to work for 3 days. When I finally did go back, I was forced to, once again, work late. This night, I stayed later than I usually do, and though I heard the keys most of the night, I then heard something else. More keys. Different, though. These sounded present, in the same room. As I took a quick stroll down the hallway, I saw Mr. Morales. I decided I was ready to talk to him, even if he was going to laugh at me, to tell me that I was hearing things. I told him my story, and he asked me, "So you've been hearing keys at night, before tonight?" I told him, "Yes, I'm not usually here this late, but I'm always here until 6. "That's not me," he said. "And it's not my keys." He pulled out his key ring and gave it a shake. The sound was sharp and metallic, completely different from the haunting, hollow jingle I'd heard. He then goes on to explain that he never comes to the school before 7. So, not Mr. Morales. It wasn't until years later, during a staff meeting with some older teachers, that I learned the truth. Decades ago, a janitor named Mr. Tate had worked at the middle school. He was known for his kindness and dedication to the job, which he'd had for almost 30 years. One winter, while locking up, he'd suffered a heart attack, and he'd slipped on an icy staircase in the basement. He was found the next morning. When I'd first learned the story, it gave me chills. I'd never told anyone about what I'd experienced, but another coworker said, "They say you can still hear his keys sometimes, especially if you're here late. Poor guy's just making his rounds." For some reason after that, the jingling didn't really frighten me as much, but it never stopped. Even on my last night there, as I packed up my classroom for the final time, I heard it. The keys faint and steady, following me down the hallway, almost like an old friend saying goodbye. My brother is a firefighter. A few years ago, he responded to a call for a house fire. The neighbor had called in saying the vacant house for sale next door was on fire. The houses weren't too far apart, but not close enough where you could clearly see into the windows. The operator did tell them that you could hear his wife in the background yelling about seeing someone in one of the upstairs windows, but she seemed rather angry. saying that it was all the trash causing the fire to get worse. So, my brother and his co-workers arrived, and were all able to put it out. He said that there was no one inside, but it looked like there'd been a squatter living upstairs. So it was believed that the squatter caused the fire by accident in the bedroom upstairs, and he or she left after the wife saw him or her through the window. End of story, right? Nope. The damage wasn't terrible, so the house was eventually fixed and put on the market. A young couple bought it, and after a few months, the police responded to a call on the house by the same neighbors. The same man who had called last time called about hearing screaming inside, and the operator said that she could hear the wife in the background yelling about the woman puking everywhere. It ended up being a case of domestic violence, and things were handled accordingly. Apparently, one of the cops went over to talk to the neighbors about what they had heard and questioned how his wife had seen the woman puking when that didn't happen near the windows and the blinds were mostly shut. The guy looked confused, said that he didn't have a wife and had never had a woman living there. The recording of the 911 call was played back, and sure as shit, a woman was heard in the background. This story got back to my brother, and he did some digging. There was only one thing he could find that would give any sort of answer. The reason the house was put up for sale was because a middle-aged woman who had owned the house had died in the house. My brother actually got around to asking the neighbor about her. The neighbor said that she was a very neat person. Everything always had to be in its place, almost OCD, about her home and her things. As a firefighter, I've been in a lot of fires, saved a lot of lives. I've even had my own life saved while on the job. But one that sticks with me for different reasons is the one that I'm going to share today. It was a first alarm fire turned two alarm blaze in the heart of downtown, a dilapidated apartment building, all dry wood and tight spaces. By the time we arrived, the top floors were fully engulfed. It was clear that this was a 3-alarm. We went in fast. People were screaming from their windows, still trapped on upper floors. The radios buzzed with chaos. My team and I worked methodically, clearing each unit in the apartments. And that's when I found him. He was slumped in a corner on a third-floor apartment, unconscious, smoke curling around him like a shroud. The heat was unbearable, the walls groaning under the strain of the fire. I didn't have time to think. I just grabbed him, hauled him over my shoulder, and carried him down 3 flights of stairs, barely making it out before the building collapsed. Outside, I laid him on the pavement, and the paramedics took over as I caught my breath. My adrenaline was still surging as I watched them work to stabilize him. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another life saved, another person who got lucky. A week later, though, I saw his face on the news. He wasn't just some unlucky tenant. He was a wanted man, a fugitive who'd been on the run for years. The news anchors called him a drifter killer. He'd been moving from town to town, targeting people who lived on the margins. Runaways, sex workers, the homeless. 12 victims confirmed. Maybe more. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd saved a killer. And that was a first for me. But just as far as I'd known, you know? You don't usually get to follow up with the people you save. It's just your job to save them. The arrest made headlines. The fire had forced him out of hiding, and my rescue brought him straight into the hands of the police. At first, I wrestled with the irony. The job I'd sworn to do, saving lives without judgment or hesitation, had also meant saving a man who'd stolen so many lives himself. The trial was a media circus. The man I'd saved sat stone-faced as his gruesome crimes were laid bare, the methods he used, the stories of his victims, and the families he'd destroyed. He pled not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. DNA, fingerprints, even an online journal where he'd kept notes about his victims. I was subpoenaed to testify, not about the crimes, but about the night of the fire. The defense tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance, a desperate man who'd been caught in a tragic accident. They asked me if I'd seen him trying to escape the flames or heard him call for help. I told the truth. He was unconscious when I found him, and I didn't know who he was until after I'd pulled him out, days later. And that was it. My testimony didn't absolve him, but it didn't really incriminate him either. After the trial, people asked me if I regretted saving him. Friends, colleagues, even strangers wanted to know if I'd wished I'd just left him there to burn. I always gave them the same answer. No. My job isn't to judge, it's to save. I've saved hundreds of lives in my career. Children, the elderly, addicts, abusers, people who'd made bad choices, and people who'd just had bad luck. I don't get to decide whose life is worth more than another's. That's not my role. It never will be. The man was sentenced to life without parole, and they moved him to a maximum security prison a few states away. I don't think about him much anymore, but every so often, I'll see his face in my mind. Pale, smoke-streaked, lifeless when I found him. And I can hear my captain yelling, "Get him out, Dylan. The ceiling's coming down." And I did. I got him out, just like I was trained to do. Would I do it again? Yes, every time. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. Brand new episodes every Friday night. And keep those eyes open long enough for those deep sleep videos. And of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. I want to take this time to thank the Darkest Hour channel members. You all are amazing. We just launched it on a whim, and I was so overwhelmed in a good way to see that 6 of you had already signed up. So, thank you to Lori Tesdall, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, T. Colt Daddy Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, and Carrie Watkins. Welcome and thank you so much for your support. Also, a big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons, whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Mary H, Tanya F, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Tony P, Lissane, Arlene F, Adrienne, TF Parham, and Jason G. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon or become a channel member. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.